Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Pony Stampede podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Billy Embody. The early signing period is upon us, and if you're just new to this whole recruiting thing, this is probably about as wild of a ending as SMU could potentially have that I've seen through my years in covering this team. And we're going to tee it all up for you guys on this podcast and kind of break down where things are at. And then also, at the end of this podcast, when we kind of wrap it up, there's going to be a VIP portion of the podcast that you can find on ponystampede.com. So look for that on Pony Stampede. If you're a VIP subscriber, we're going to have that part of the podcast on the website. So only for VIP subscribers, a final prediction piece and all those things on the on Pony Stampede. So look for that. And without further ado, let's jump right in to kind of the lay of the land for the recruiting class as the early signing period is set to begin on Wednesday. SMU hosted 4 official visitors this weekend with quarterback commit Raylan Sharp from Allen and offensive line commit Ben Sparks from Norman making their way over to SMU. They were also joined by Marshall, Texas wide receiver Savion Williams and Blinn Junior College wide receiver Danny Gray. They were all in Dallas for those official visits that wrapped up on Sunday. We'll kind of see where the dust settles on both Danny Gray and Savion Williams as SMU looks to add a wide receiver or 2 in the 2020 recruiting class for sure. Everything went really well with Raylan Sharp and Ben Sparks, both pretty solid in their commitments heading into the week. But the all eyes are going to be on Gray and Williams as they get ready to make decisions. And look, I mean, when you talk about Savion Williams, he's a 6'5", 200-pound, 4-star wide receiver that was committed to Arkansas, backed off that pledge after Chad Morris got fired, and SMU's been recruiting him for a while. And then Danny Gray is now the number 2 wide receiver in the junior college rankings on 24/7 Sports, and he's been committed to TCU since the summer. And SMU's made up a lot of ground, has done a really good job recruiting him and his entire family, and can, pull this off potentially, I think. It's a real threat for SMU to land Danny Gray, especially. I think that's kind of the one that I would circle out of those 2. I think Savion Williams is probably going to end up signing late, so he'll kind of be one to watch in the spring. But SMU did a great job recruiting him. If you follow him on Twitter, he posted a picture with the horses out at the equestrian center, him riding them. He's a big horse kind of junkie, I guess, and works with them out in East Texas. And so that was really cool for the staff to get him and his family out there to the equestrian center and to use the equestrian team to kind of help recruit Savion Williams and try to make a splash with him. But we'll be following him and seeing what'll happen with him. And then on the wide receiver front, I placed a new crystal ball in for Thad Johnson out of Beaumont Westbrook. He's really one of the best receivers that's uncommitted in the country, and somebody I think that could rise up potentially into that 4-star rating on 24/7 Sports. He's just on the fringe. He's a high 3-star right now, but he had another strong season, over 1,000 yards for Beaumont Westbrook, and he's been really quiet. He hasn't really taken too many visits. There's been other teams trying to court him, but as of now, things are kind of trending nicely for SMU. So I put that I put that crystal ball in for Thad Johnson to land at SMU, and we'll kind of see if that does come to fruition. But right now, there's a lot of confidence that he ends up in this class, which would be a huge land, kind of a James Prochet type of replacement for SMU there on the wide receiver front. Kind of a weird situation that happened heading into the weekend, but Houston Westfield running back Kendall Taylor announced a commitment to SMU, and I talked with some folks around the SMU side, and they kind of cleared up that he's not a commitment in this 2020 class. There's a lot of things going on with him that he's going to have to clean up and take care of before he could potentially be even considered a commitment. So I would not read too much into that. SMU right now not looking like it's going to take a 2020 running back. They'll probably dip into the transfer portal. They've got 2 young running backs in TJ McDaniel and Ulysses Bentley that they love on the roster. And so I'm not expecting Kendall Taylor to end up at SMU at this point. But he is one to monitor. I mean, he's had discussions with the staff, but he's got a lot of work to do to end up at SMU. So he's not a commitment for the 2020 class, and don't expect him to be signing. As far as remaining targets go for this class, here's the deal. You're done at offensive line. You're done at tight end with Kedrick James coming in as a transfer in the fall. You've got your quarterback in Raylan Sharp, and you've got 3 wide receivers out there that can legitimately be considered top targets for SMU and Savion and Thad and Danny Gray. And then on the other side of the ball, they're still recruiting Kari Coleman really hard out of New Orleans, trying to get him to flip from Kansas to SMU. They're battling Tennessee, TCU, the most for him. And it'll be interesting to see what happens on Wednesday, because he is they have been pushing and pushing and pushing, trying to get him to flip. And it's just kind of something where you'll see where the chips fall. But I don't think he's going to sign with Kansas. He'll end up somewhere else. He's taken a TCU and a Tennessee official visit. He canceled his Vanderbilt visit this past weekend. So he's done taking visits. He's, I think, closing in on a final decision, and we'll kind of see how things go with him. And then Devere Levelston, the Tyler Junior College defensive lineman, is still out there. Still hasn't publicly committed to SMU yet, but I got my crystal ball in for him. So I think things are in a good spot there. And then we'll kind of monitor. I think SMU's still wanting a corner. I don't hold much confidence that they're going to get one during the early signing period. Jacorian Bennett seems to be down to Maryland and Mississippi State, and he was kind of the big name that they had been pursuing. Had him in for an official visit over the summer and have been pushing for him, but doesn't appear that they're going to land him. Jamoy Hodge is one junior college linebacker that had been committed to Nebraska. There's not a ton of confidence there, but SMU's been still recruiting him and trying to beat out TCU, Louisville, some schools like those before he ends up signing early. And then Krishan Brown out of Oklahoma City, who I've talked about before on the board, is going to stick with Kansas from what it seems like. So those are kind of the remaining targets out there that we're watching really closely come Wednesday and seeing where things play out. A thing to kind of remember about this class is SMU is going to have 2 gray shirts enroll in January, and Henry Mossberg and Warren Walls. Mossberg tore his ACL last year, late in the year at South Lake Carroll, and so they opted to have him gray shirt and recover, and then start his clock in January and count towards that class. And then Warren Walls had some paperwork and kind of issues that didn't allow him to enroll, so he's another one that again will come in January. So that's good. I think SMU by my count is going to have about 9 new offensive linemen on board in January coming in to compete for time, which is an incredible job just turning over that position for SMU. And then on the other side of things with Walls, that's a 3rd defensive end, defensive tackle type of guy that they can bring in to potentially shore up that front. His clock will just get started and get him in and work with Kaz and start getting bigger and ready to go for the 2019 season. So that's kind of a high level look at the recruiting class, kind of where things stand coming down the stretch into the early signing period. We're going to take a quick break from the podcast, answer some subscriber questions, and kind of see a look around at Houston and TCU as well, and kind of how things are going for them down the stretch here too. So with that, we're going to take a quick break from the Pony Stampede podcast. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Pony Stampede podcast. Thanks for listening. I was asked by one of our Pony Stampede subscribers to kind of do a look back a little bit on the 2018 class that has now been on campus for 2 football seasons, and kind of assess where things stand with that class. And I'll start with this, and this stood out to me, that the 5 highest rated players in the class have done 0 for SMU, whether it was Levon Livingston not even lasting really through an entire season, or Jared Miles not lasting an entire summer. Shabazz Dotson and Travion Johnson have been hurt in Dotson's case, and then Johnson has kind of been in the doghouse. And then Tamarick Williams has played at times, but he hasn't really, become this bulldozing kind of running back that they were hoping for when they decided to keep him on board and sign him, and it just hasn't clicked for him. And so I'm interested to see what happens with Tamarick as he gets into his redshirt sophomore year, and certainly SMU will be looking for somebody to step up at the running back position, but as of now, he hasn't really done much at all. And then when you go down the list and you look at Will Brown, he's recovering from surgery this fall and redshirted, and then Ben Redding has been getting more and more playing time for SMU, and I think he's going to end up being a really good player down the line. Preston Ellison plays a lot. He's kind of one of the heir apparents at the linebacker spot potentially for Patrick Nelson. Trevor Denbo has contributed as well. He's been starting for the Mustangs, as did Robert Hayes, whose career is now up. Darren Brown hasn't done anything at all out of Converse Judson, one of their defensive tackle additions. Gary Wiley and Bo Morris have been huge for SMU. Gary Wiley probably, you thought maybe you'd see him have a bigger impact this fall, but he's certainly somebody that in the later parts of his career I think is going to come on even more and more as he continues to develop. Jimmy Phillips is somebody that plays a lot for SMU, as is J.C. Rispris. And then Jalen Thomas is SMU's all-conference left tackle and has started pretty much since he got to SMU. He took over, I think, 4 games in to his true freshman season at the left tackle spot, or at the right tackle spot, and then they moved him to the left tackle. So he's been excellent. Terry Keys has been hurt and redshirted his freshman year after an off-the-field accident he got into, and so we'll kind of continue to monitor his development. And then Terrence Newman figures to be a plug in the middle for SMU after they lose a bunch of defensive tackles to graduation this year. And then Nick Dennis, who just graduated or is graduating, is going to be was a 2-year starter, so he worked out really well. So the bottom 2 recruits in that class, Terrence Newman and Nick Dennis, kind of panned out fairly well, I'd say, when you're looking at SMU and kind of how they went about assembling that class. But yeah, it's a class that hasn't really had a lot of star power, I would say. I think Jalen Thomas is probably the only one that you'd sit here and say so far has been a star. But it is still early. It's still early in this class, and you got the talent in guys like Travion Johnson and Shabazz Johnson that they could kind of come around, maybe figure things out, get it together, and contribute at a high level. So we'll kind of keep watching those guys and see how things work. But get back to the current recruiting class, and I was asked if I think SMU is going to end up with some California recruiting ties and try to recruit Cali, and I think more so they've done it on the walk-on front. They've done a good job recruiting walk-ons out of there, and then they've got Mason Mastroff out of California. Kobe Bryant was out of a California junior college, and then but overall, I mean, with Sonny Dykes having spent time at Cal and David Grew having been out there as well on Sonny's staff, I don't necessarily think it's enough to create some Cali ties, but the staff has kind of shown that they're okay with going out of state and getting other players, and if that means going to California for a good player, they'll be open to it. They got Mastroff in this class. They got Nelson Paul out of Florida in the class before. They've got a lot of out-of-state flavor, kind of more regionally in this class with guys like Aaron Smith and Ben Sparks and Dalton Perdue and other guys like that. But overall, I mean, I don't necessarily think it's going to become an emphasis with SMU. Kind of looking over Houston's class, I was asked kind of how things are trending for them, and I think they're in for a decent finish. The big highlight for them would be Stacy Sneed, who's formerly committed to Colorado and certainly has been, I think one of the better running backs in the state of Texas over the last couple of years. He's been really good, but I think he ends up going to Houston. I put a crystal ball pick in. He was on campus this weekend, and I feel like he's going to end up there. So that'll be a nice close for them at running back. And then other than that, though, their class is pretty much set. So they're not creating a ton of buzz, but they're ending up with pretty good haul for them. I think they're 7th in the AAC right now. And overall, we haven't seen, I think, too many recruiting battles between SMU and Houston, I think, in this class for the most part, I'd say. But I do think you'll kind of start to see that more and more. I mean, if anything, I mean, Marcus Smith was one that SMU battled Houston for and won. Carl Taylor had a Houston offer. So I mean, they had some, but you never know like what's kind of a head-to-head battle. Ugana Nana was actually one that Houston won that SMU really liked a lot. The Arlington Seguin, offensive tackle, who's I think is going to be a really good player at the next level. But yeah, other than that, they really didn't battle, I think, too much head-to-head in terms of true, I think, targets in this class. But they've got a decent class kind of built up, and we'll kind of see how they finish out before assessing it in the final run. But on the TCU front, they've got a really good class. I think number 40 nationally, fourth in the Big 12, and I love kind of the top half of TCU's class. Now, I think when you look at it, how does Danny Gray fit in there? He's their number four. He's their fourth highest rated commitment in the 2020 class. So if he leaves and signs with SMU, that could be a hit for TCU. But for the most part, they do have some guys that they're in on late. Quentin Johnston is a four-star wide receiver they're in on, and he that would bring TCU into the top 30 overall classes in the country. Bud Clark is a Louisiana safety, four-star that they're, I think, going to end up landing. So they'll end up with a good haul there. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how things play out with TCU and look. I mean, they're battling SMU for Jamoy Hodge and Kari Coleman down the stretch here, and it'll be interesting to see if they can land them. Obviously, if SMU lands Danny Gray, that's a big blow. That's a direct flip. That's somebody both of those staffs really want. So we'll keep an eye on TCU's class. But overall, I mean, they're recruiting really well. But in terms of their late offers, which was kind of what I was asked about, I don't think it's actually, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think I was surprised that they offered Kari Coleman so late, just because they recruit Louisiana fairly well. But on the other side of that, I mean, Jamoy Hodge was kind of a late recruiting guy in general, and so it'll kind of be interesting to see how things end up with TCU and especially Danny Gray. That's kind of one of those big time guys that if SMU can flip, that'll put them on the map for sure to finish out this 2020 recruiting class. So with that, guys, we're going to wrap up this podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. But if you're a Pony Stampede subscriber, stay tuned. You can listen to more on the 2020 recruiting class, kind of a VIP edition of the podcast, in just a couple seconds. There'll be some dead air, and then you can continue to listen to that on Pony Stampede. You can find that on the YouTube link that I posted for this podcast. So with that, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this podcast, and keep it locked on Pony Stampede for the latest on SMU's finish to the 2020 recruiting class. Welcome back to the VIP portion of the Pony Stampede podcast. Hope you guys enjoy the way I did this. I know a YouTube link sometimes can kind of be a pain, especially for the traditional podcast kind of style. But this is my kind of fix for it right now. So again, I'm sorry if it's a little bit more difficult to maybe listen to in your car or what have you with the YouTube link. But we're going to keep this pretty short. So if you're listening, it should be relatively painless for you guys. But I did want to drop in and give my final class prediction, which I will post this on the board, at least kind of where I see things as of Monday morning after checking around. And I think it's going to be a big finish, but I think it's also going to kind of be quiet in a way for SMU. So, all right, here's what I've got for you guys. I think SMU lands Tyler Junior College defensive lineman DeVere Levelston. I've had my pick in since late last week. He canceled his official visit, for this weekend to Minnesota and at one time Virginia Tech, and everything he's telling the staff still locked in to sign early and commit to SMU. Is just a matter of when at this point, in my opinion, and from talking with different people around him and the recruitment and things like that. So that would be a big land, big area of need for SMU, and one that they'll be able to kind of be pretty amped up about. As far as the wide receivers, this is where I feel like I've got a pretty good beat on what's going to happen. I think Beaumont Westbrook, wide receiver Thad Johnson, is going to end up signing Wednesday with SMU. I think he's quietly maintained with SMU that things are going well and all of that. So getting Thad would be huge. He's kind of a natural replacement for James Prochet. And he's obviously teammates with Jay Bell, who, as we posted on the board, is going to gray shirt for SMU. So that opens up a spot for a transfer for somebody else to kind of take that spot and come in. He tore his labrum this year and played with it and then had surgery. So it's going to be a long road to recovery for him. So they opted to just kind of move him back and let his clock start a little bit later. And so I think Thad's going to end up in the class. I've got a crystal ball pick in for him. Again, he's telling them all the right things and hasn't taken any other visits. There was kind of some buzz quietly around the program that he had committed on his official visit. So we're going to find out if he was for real with that, and certainly if he's going to stick with what he's telling the staff. On Danny Gray, he's going to be one that I feel like we're going to be tracking all the way up until Wednesday. And if he does sign early, which is kind of the indication he's given to the staff, then I think it's SMU. I think they flip him from TCU and he ends up at SMU. Now, on the other side of things, if he takes it later, if he kind of backs off that and takes it later, it's going to be difficult for them to land him over some of the Power Fives that he's been talking about that have been involved with him for a while now. Auburn, Georgia, kind of the main two there that I would watch in the spring. But look, there's a lot of confidence on SMU's side that they're going to get Danny Gray at this point. I don't think he's signed. I don't think he's going to TCU, period. I've talked with TCU's side of things, and they kind of feel the same way. And they just kind of lost a lot of momentum that they had with him, and things have kind of fallen apart. So, but SMU's the one to watch early. If he doesn't, it's going to be really difficult for them to land him. But they've done a really good job recruiting him. I think if he signs early, it's going to be with SMU. We'll kind of hear more on that as the week goes by. But right now, I've got him in the class. I don't know if I'm ready to make a crystal ball pick and kind of lock him in, but I think he ends up in the class right now if he does stick with kind of with what his current plan is, which is to sign Wednesday. He's going to kind of finalize it, but it's just one of those things. Is one of these big schools going to get him to hold off until the spring just so that he can visit and figure things out? So we'll be watching that one. He's a monster. He's just got bumped up to the number 2 junior college wide receiver in the country, and he'd be a big finish for SMU. The final player that I don't necessarily think is in the class, but he's going to be one to watch, is Jamoy Hodge. He's got Louisville, TCU, and SMU in his final 3, and he's not the final player to watch because of Kari Coleman, of course. But I'm not confident enough in him to kind of make the call to SMU right now either. But I was surprised that he kept SMU in his final 3. So we'll see if they can kind of maybe pull off a surprise and get Jamoy Hodge. And then with Kari Coleman, they're still in contact. They're still pushing, hoping that they can figure it out and get him on board. He's done a lot of things that most recruits would not do unless you were very, very, very interested in going to that program. So I'll kind of dish on that a little bit more after the signing period, after he makes that final call. But at this point, I'm not ready to call him into the class. I think Tennessee's been pressing, and they're in a good spot. We'll kind of see shortly on Wednesday kind of what his plan is and how things go. But yeah, Kari Coleman and Jamoy Hodge are kind of those guys that are just kind of out there right now, and we'll kind of find out what happens. If there's a doomsday prediction which would be, miss like Devere Levelston kind of changes course 180 and goes somewhere else, which I don't think he is. But if they don't get any of the wide receivers, I don't really know what they'll do, but they'll go to the portal and they'll go to, a lot of these guys that have reached out and try to shore things up on that front. I mean, SMU's got a lot of people interested in it in them to come play in this offense, and I think that's kind of the direction they'd go. They don't want to reach on high school prospects and have them be at SMU 5 years or 4 years and not contributing at all. Now, on the grad transfer front, I posted on the board that Mike Williams was there on Friday for practice, which he was. He got the tour, he got to meet with the staff and do all those things. I think, look, there's a lot of people that feel really good about him ending up at SMU. I feel the same. They've got some ties there with Blake Brockermeyer, whose sons go to All Saints. SMU was right in it for him when he was being recruited before he ended up at Stanford. But I mean, I'd be surprised right now if SMU wasn't the pick for Mike Williams at this point. And then on the other side of things, Chris Nager, who's the Texas punter kicker who can kind of do it all, he's on board. I think he's going to end up being on campus and ending up at SMU, and he'll be a scholarship guy as well. So that'll be something to watch as well. On the running back front, I don't know a name. I really don't, but apparently SMU has somebody on the hook. We'll keep trying to find out. But running back will be a grad transfer position for SMU, and then offensive line as well. They hosted Ryan Johnson, the Tennessee offensive lineman. He's going to make some other visits from what it sounds like and kind of feel things out, but a lot of people think it went really well with him as well. So those are some of the grad transfers that you can look at and kind of see. In terms of, this is kind of a reflection on the 2020 class. And look, I think this is probably best answered after Wednesday, but I think in terms of what I would have changed if I was SMU, I think the official visits in the summer were good. And that's a common thing for a lot of programs. But when I think right now they'd love to have an official visit with Kari Coleman in their back pocket. And it's kind of, it'll be interesting to kind of see how they go about this in the future with guys like him, Jacorian Bennett. Like, if you think somebody is a dude and you can get him on campus for an unofficial visit in the spring or early summer, I would think that's kind of going to be the play, because then you can use that official late to try and seal the deal. Like, if they had Kari Coleman up for an official visit, at this point, honestly, I think they'd get him. I really do. Just kind of the way Kari's always dealt with SMU, it's always been very positive. And if they had him on campus for 3 days to close the deal before early signing period, I think they'd get him. And he canceled his Vanderbilt official visit, and he's still considering SMU. So if they had an official visit with Kari right now, I think they'd be in a really good spot. So that might be some of the things that I kind of look at. But overall, I mean, I think they did a really good job. They were very selective. They didn't take anyone they didn't think could play. So far, we haven't seen any decommitments. Aaron Smith does appear to be headed towards signing early, which is good for SMU. That was a word I got before I jumped on this podcast. So we'll kind of see. It's going to be a wild finish, though. I mean, it honestly is. It's a class that can be boom, or it can be pretty bust. And so we'll kind of see. Look, SMU's done a really good job filling out this roster. Every year they've been here, it's improved. So I don't think it's time to question or anything, but they really need a strong 2020 recruiting finish. They finished with 10 wins. I think a guy like Thad, for example, there's no reason why they shouldn't get him if they're this confident this late in the game. We'll kind of see how it goes, but it's closing time, and they've got to close on a couple big time kids and capitalize on the momentum they have from this season. So, and going into the 21 class, there's a lot of momentum there. I think this is a class that can change the program. It just on a huge level. I mean, it's just, if you talk about the chance to land Preston Stone, to land Savion Byrd, guys like that, I mean, you're just kind of playing with house money at that point. Um, for Kamar Wheaton, the the Garland Lakeview Centennial running back who's a 5-star prospect. I don't know, that one's kind of going to be just weird in general. I mean, SMU talks to him a lot. He does show them a lot of love, but overall, I mean, it's just kind of it's going to be a weird one. It's just going to be weird, and we'll kind of have to monitor it. But overall, I mean, I like I like their chances. I guess if he was a guy in terms of true 5 stars that I would pick for that they're legitimately involved with. I mean, he's one of them, but his recruitment's just going to be really weird. So I just keep an eye on him, but I wouldn't get overly excited just because of the way things have trended over the last couple months with him. And again, like I said, he's just kind of different. So with the 21 class, but it is a class that I really do believe you can end up changing the way your program is viewed by landing guys like Preston Stone, Savion Byrd, guys like that. It's just they've got a real shot to do it, and you need to continue to develop on the field, which I think they'll do. But that's how big those guys are, just around town, and certainly, they'll be able to kind of finish with a bang, next year. I mean, they really will. Like if you can get Preston and Savion on board sometime soon, that'll help you in the 2020 recruiting or 2021 recruiting class. And then when you have the on-field success that I think that they're going to end up having, it's got a chance to be one of those classes that kind of changes the game completely for them. So I think when you look at their opportunity to do that, I think it's real. I wouldn't be telling you guys that it was if it wasn't. I mean, you can go around and you can look at other sites covering those recruitments, and I mean, SMU's a player, SMU's real, and especially with somebody like Byrd, who a lot of people just think could end up going to Texas or going to LSU or wherever. I mean, it's very real that he could end up at SMU. So we'll be monitoring it, and we'll kind of turn the full attention to that class after the early signing period, and kind of set the stage, see what needs are, see how they'd like to kind of approach it. But yeah, I mean, it's got a chance to be a program changing class, and that's kind of what SMU is pushing. So it'll be fun to monitor. But with that, guys, hope you guys enjoyed kind of this VIP portion of the podcast. And please keep this podcast here. I mean, don't share the link. Don't do that. Doing this for you guys because people asked for it. And but at this point, this is the best I can do is kind of putting together a YouTube link. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, please don't share it. This is a VIP portion of your subscription. Hopefully, we can figure out a way that it's kind of lives on the SMU site. But again. We'll keep you guys in the loop and everything as they look to finish out strong in the 2020 recruiting class.